Good afternoon. Welcome to the Farmer and Supplier webinar for our Hawaii State Farm to School Aina Pono program. We're really grateful for all of you that have registered. It looks like we have about 115 of you that have joined us today. So we're really excited to present this information. Just so you know, this webinar will be recorded and available on the Farm to School Hui webpage, the Hawaii State Farm to School Hui webpage, so that you can access it later and hopefully maybe forward it to any other farmers or producers that might have missed this. So today's Farmer and Supplier webinar is presented by Hawaii Department of Education School for Food Services Branch, the Hawaii Farm to School Hui, and partners. And I'm going to introduce Leidy Burnell right now from Hawaii Public Health.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. My name is Leidy Burnell. I coordinate a statewide network called the Hawaii Farm to School Hui. It's a program of Hawaii Public Health Institute. We were founded in 2010 as a statewide network, and our mission is to strengthen Hawaii's farm to school movement. Some of the projects that we oversee are listed here: Garden to Cafeteria, Farm to ECE or Preschool, Agriculture Education and Food Systems, Peace Gardens, Rat Lungworm Disease Prevention, and School Food Systems, or Farm to State, which this webinar is brought to you by our School Food Systems Working Group. So welcome again, and if you could go to the next slide. Just to get a sense of how we envision farm to school, having three core elements: school gardens, education, and local food procurement, which is what we're here to talk about today. This graphic comes from the National Farm to School Network, so this is a nationwide movement and certainly growing here in Hawaii. So welcome again, and turn it back to Joelle.
Today's webinar, we're going to cover several items: Hawaii's Department of Education Aina Pono program, what products are needed to be supplied for that program, several options for producers and farmers. We'll also go over the necessary items that local farms will need to sell directly to the DOE or to an aggregator. Also the contracting process, and then we're going to hear from some real farmer aggregators and distributors who are currently working with the Department of Education and hear about their experiences, maybe some challenges that they encountered and overcame to help you all as you come down this road with us. And then we'll follow it up with question and answers. So today's speaker, I'll skip to number 2 because that's me. That's Joelle Edwards. I work with Malama Kauai on the island of Kauai. I'm the Farm to School Coordinator and the Food Access Coordinator. Dexter Kishida, who works for Hawaii Department of Education in the School Food Services Branch. Sunshine Roberts with HIP Agriculture Kohala Food Hub. Donna Shapiro with Hawaii Ulu Cooperative, and Harmony Williams with Sustainable Molokai. We're going to start with Dexter.
Thank you so much, Joelle. Thank you all for attending. And I get the privilege of, representing the Department of Education. I'm, as stated, the Farm to School Coordinator and love working with local companies. What we, as a department, quickly realized that while the original intent was to work directly with and really focus on farmers and agricultural producers, that buying local, the economic impact and impact to our students is even greater when we expanded that to include the local manufacturing that happens and folks that can do value add to the products that are grown and raised in Hawaii. We define local as the full state. We haven't implemented anything formal in any contract yet that would give extra points or any incentive for kind of a hyper-local focus. But I do find that between costs and even just the general support from the community we're feeding is so much larger and so much better when it really is the neighborhood company that is producing the items that our kids are eating. Our mission is to feed our keiki with healthy, nutritious food so they can achieve academic success. The main goal that my director really wanted to get across is that everything we do is so our keiki can have successful, and it can be successful in really all aspects of their life. That while we are the Department of Education, and so academic success is really important, it is also setting them up for lifelong success. The one thing they will be doing, we're pretty sure the rest of their life is eating. So what we feed them now helps to build that base for the future. And in Aina Pono, there's 5 program goals. As we launched Aina Pono, we define it kind of in a loose interpretation. It's simply good food. That's why the Aina not having the kahako is just talking about food. And so to have a successful program, though, we wanted to have some way of measuring some benchmarks. And so our goals are to target or to get to 40% local food. We want to increase our participation. We'd like them to not only take a plate, but actually eat it. So reducing food waste is another part of what we do. And that means feeding them stuff that they want to eat. That doesn't mean candy, soda, and burgers all the time. But we're finding that good home cooked type meals are what students choosing to eat. The other part is to be responsible for the public funds that we utilize. We're funded both federally and with state funds, as well as the funding that comes from students paying for meals. But we'd like the program to still be cost neutral. In other words, as we purchase more local, we'd like to find cost savings within the system to be able to pay for this and not keep asking for more public funds to buy local. Does it always cost more to buy local? Not always, we're finding. But in a whole bunch of other cases, yes. But to do this, we're going to have to modernize our systems. While our immediate goal is some technological advances, it's also just implementing better systems in how we produce what we do. And does it mean that we cook everything from scratch in a kitchen? Probably not. We definitely are going to need, for sure in the short term and most likely in the long term, partner vendors to be able to process things and make things. Just so we can get lunch for 1,000 students out on time, as an example. And so getting to the heart of what we're going to discuss today is the products that we're looking for. We're pretty open to seeing what Hawaii has to offer. And I'll be frank, for the longest time, we kind of just said, this is what we want. This is our menu, that's it. When my director took his position a few years ago, one thing he did was, well, no, let's see what's out there. What are people producing? And go from there. That's the place we're starting. So it's, how much can you grow for? Can you do the state? That's great. If you can't do the state, can you do your island? Oh, maybe that's still too big. Maybe it's going to be just a handful of schools. There's always an issue with that too, right? There's a good and a bad. While we're trying to work with all different sizes of organizations, there still are capacity limitations currently in our office. So are we going to be able to manage 500 different contracts today? No, but we're going to start somewhere, and that's what we're committed to. So when we talk about orders, while we're looking at feeding the whole state, and our enrollment hovers around 180,000 students, we feed about 100,000 lunches a day and about 30,000 breakfasts. We're working with the First Lady's office in our Jumpstart Breakfast movement to increase that. So we're definitely looking for breakfast items that kids love, so we can push that forward and get more kids to eat a good, healthy breakfast to start their day. So 100,000 servings for lunch. What does that equate to for a half cup of veggie? We serve 3/4 of a cup to 1 cup of vegetables every day. And it equates to somewhere around 12 to 14,000 tons of product that we're going to need for that one day of serving throughout the state. So can you do that today? Most of our Hawaii folks couldn't, not alone. But you'll hear some examples later of how we are able to gather enough food to be able to run these products. You'll hear from the Ulu Co-op that can share how we're making this happen. So that would just be for regular meal programs. Another program that we have implemented is our Aina Pono Harvest program. So this is where we implement throughout the whole state, just one time throughout the year, a special product. Breadfruit started as in our harvest program, where we did a wrap, which didn't go so well. It was a Kalua pig ulu wrap. And then we quickly moved to an ulu stew that caught on really well. And so, which became a part of the menu. We've done papaya, banana, and a couple handfuls of other products to just highlight something of Hawaii's bounty. We're still looking for chocolate. I'd love to do chocolate next February. We missed the timeline needed for this February, but would love to do chocolate from Hawaii. And so it doesn't have to be that half-cup serving. It could be a tasting. It could be one thing on the plate. It could replace it and be a full meal too. So the harvest is a pretty flexible way that if you're not able to provide a consistent product throughout the whole year, that maybe we'll work with you to try it out. It's also a good way kind of for us to market test with the students, whether it's a go or no go. One thing that's not on this slide is also our pop-up cafes. The first round is with Kauai Shrimp, and we're looking for other types of great pop-up cafe options that we can serve in the future, where we'll set up at a school and kind of like a pop-up food truck, same thing, kind of surprise kids that, hey, here's a new option today. Try Kauai Shrimp Scampi for today's lunch. One thing that, or the thing that we're constantly needing on the vegetable front, almost everything, but the USDA breaks it down into different colors. So we have dark greens, we have red orange, we have beans, peas, legumes, we have a starchy and other category. And we're always looking for red, orange, and dark greens. The USDA mandates portions and so many servings of those. While dark greens are things, and I know the slide is a little hard to see, you can find this on USDA or later when you get the slide deck. Things like romaine, green leaf, red leaf would count as a dark green, as well as broccoli, kale. We actually don't have 100% of our greens coming from Hawaii. So that's one area that we're still looking for more farmers to grow the types of dark greens that we utilize. We don't use collards currently, but it's something that we'd like to start playing with to see how we can get a more variety of dark greens to our kids. The red orange is actually really difficult for us. Currently, we're using tomatoes and carrots as the primary red orange vegetables that we serve. And while tomatoes in pizza and spaghetti, etc., are a great way for kids to like red orange vegetables, we're looking for other ways. So orange sweet potatoes, as an example, while purple is beautiful, it doesn't count as a red orange vegetable. I had to ask the USDA just to make sure, but found out that it's not red orange, so an orange sweet potato would count. Another part that I would love to start discussing with folks is the beans. In Hawaii, we're finding most of our kids don't really grow up eating legumes, short of edamame. But at the same time, we are trying to introduce it. So things on our taco days or baked bean days. But all of our beans currently don't come from Hawaii. So if that's something that we can figure out a way to produce at a great cost, I'd be pretty excited to work with someone on a bean project. Green beans don't count, because I know we do a decent amount of green beans, but it's it's a legume, so think legumes when in that category. The starchy and other is totally doable too. Breadfruit, as an example, can be used either as an other vegetable or as a whole grain, but there's a lot of things that fall into that. So I'm not going to hit those too much, other than if you find a product in there, just because I'm not talking about it doesn't mean we'd love to try it. So yeah, these are things that we're really trying to find a more diverse offer to our students. And so there's a few different ways to get to the DOE. I initially said, coming into the position, that farmers will never deliver to the schools. Your job is farming and a focus on farming. There's many farmers that prove me wrong. So there's a few ways to do this. One way is to sell to an aggregator or distributor. There's a list that we've put together who we currently work with, but it doesn't prohibit you forming a co-op of your own. You'll hear from Sunshine later from HipAg, and that's exactly what they did. And so maybe forming a food hub is something that's your passion or that you've started doing, and would love to add you as a vendor, especially if your focus is going to be aggregating local produce. We're finding that there's sometimes champions in each community that one farm will act as the aggregator as well as growing things for distribution. So that's one way that you can work with the DOE. You wouldn't get a contract directly with us, the distributor will, but your food will still be funneled to our schools. Then of course the other option is selling directly to us. We'll be talking more on that, because when you're working with a distributor, your agreement and the needs really flows from whatever the distributor is. We'll lay out our needs on what we need from a distributor or a vendor that's providing food to us. But when you're working with them, it's really an agreement between you and that distributor. But if you're going to sell to us, there are some basic things that we'll discuss today, and depending on what type of food and what type of or what type of item it is, the needs will vary. But we'll talk about some of the general things in the next slide. So the necessary items that farms, but really you could almost replace farms with anybody selling to us. So general liability insurance, automobile insurance, because you're delivering on DOE campuses. Again, so the farmer that is growing but not going to deliver, this doesn't necessarily pertain to you. But if you do want to become that aggregator that will drop off on a DOE campus, this is what you'll need to get. So $1 million automobile insurance, delivery between 6 and 2, that's the time when our folks are working. Good agricultural practices, but it might not be good agricultural practices if you're a manufacturer. If you're a manufacturing item, it might, or distributor, it might be GMPs that we're looking for, or just department health certification. So that kind of depends on what you're doing. There are clauses that allow us to conduct site visits. If you're a vendor, whether a distributor or a farmer, upon request, it is in there that we can come and visit how and what you're doing. And there's some language usually, if not specific, sometimes it's specific, and we're going to say it's a 2-ounce burger, 40 pieces per case, but many times we request that you work on it with us on pack sizes, delivery schedules, etc. Whether it's 1 day a week, 1 day a month, 2 days a week, etc. The one thing we're having a lot of difficulty as of late, and it seems there's certain time periods that people fall out of compliance, is Hawaii Compliance Express. So it's an easy way that Hawaii implemented to kind of be the one-stop shop to ensure that you are compliant to do business with Hawaii. Before, you'd have to go to 2 or 3 different offices and get stamps. Now it's all online. You may have to call the office as well to get any issues cleared up. But ACE at that website is probably the first step that you should do and register for if you would like to become a vendor with Hawaii. Another issue that maybe some of the vendors later will share on, but net 30 billing is what we require. And so we do our best to try and pay within 30, but for some, that's a really long time to float, to float product. The other thing that while it's labeled optional, we really would like it. We're trying to find value in more than just food, the food that you provide us. We really want you to be a partner with us and our students. And so a farm visit or a farmer visit to the school is something we highly encourage. And it might not be a farmer, maybe you're a manufacturer of a product of chocolate and would love to either have a school come and visit you, or you visit the school with some of your product. We really are trying to connect and be more than just buying stuff, but connecting the community to our kids. So now the exciting part of the contracting process. As I stated, we're governed by federal and state rules. If it's only a little bit of business we're doing, we can usually do an informal procurement. It still requires 3 bids before we buy, or 3 quotes before we buy. But our threshold is only 25,000. And so for a system as large as us, hovering between the 9th and 11th largest, depending on what day it is, that gets spent really quickly. So most of the things we do are through a formal procurement system. And in a formal procurement system, it's broken down into 2 different methods, usually. AFP, and the other is an RFP. So an information for bidding is price-based. There's no other factors that are considered. It really is just bottom line. I say that with a little caveat because there is a Buy American policy that is taken into consideration as well. But the other method is an RFP, or a request for proposals. Usually that's reserved for when an organization kind of knows what they want, but may not really know what they want, because it allows the vendor to provide their best solutions. In our procurement, we usually know pretty close to what we want. We have a good idea. You know, we've gone out, we've tried a product, and we really like it, but we need to now procure it competitively. We can't just say we want brand X, and that's what we're going to get. It has to be a brand X or equal to allow anybody and everybody the opportunity to do business with the government. So price is still the highest weighted item, but the RFP process allows other factors to be considered. Like, as I stated, our values of providing more local. How can you provide value to the education of our students? So those are, or that's why we use, for a lot of our local solicitations, the RFP process, to allow our Hawaii vendors an opportunity to, knowing that price a lot of times is going to be higher than an other counterpart, mainland or foreign item, that we can actually, you can still win because the value that you provide to the Department of Education is greater than the other brand. So it takes a little more time. In an IFB, it's just price. Not saying that that's easy to get down to a tight price, but a price. But with the request for proposal, you are writing some answers to the questions that we're asking: how you provide value, how you fulfill the 5 goals of Aina Pono, while still providing a price for your product. So to be able to bid or to submit proposals for any solicitation, or to actually even get notified of solicitations, I suggest you sign up in HANDS. It's a weird acronym, but this is one of our contracting portals. So as an organization, you can look under bidding opportunities and see what type of needs the state has. So not only for us, there's some search criteria. You can search for food only, etc. You can also look under past awards, things like that. So this is a key website if you're wanting to do business directly with the DOE. And another website that is really important is HiPro. So hipro.ehawaii.gov is the other site. And actually, it's this site that you would directly put in your bids. Actually, just for bids, you would put in your bids and some of your other information. So you do need to sign up. should allow, when you sign up for different commodity codes, it should be sending emails whenever there is a solicitation that hits that. The hard part is some of the categories are broad, so you may get some things that may not exactly pertain to you. Because if all you do is sell lemons, you may sign up under produce, but even if I need a watermelon, you're going to get the email. The Hawaii Compliance Express website, at least the landing page that I spoke about. So if you don't do business with government yet, and actually any state office, this is the website. Anytime you sell to a state entity and it's going to be more than $2,500, the state entity needs to ensure that you're compliant in 4 categories in HCE. So to ensure that your federal IRS is compliant, meaning that your taxes are paid and or on a payment program, your Hawaii taxes are paid or on a payment program, that your workers' compensation is up to date, as well as that through DOIR, the labor relations folks, that your business is registered and everything is in order.
That's it.
Thank you very much. Yep.
And so Dexter will be available for our Q&A as well. I know that was a lot of information to take. We're going to hear from Sunshine Roberts with Kohala Food Hub first.
Hey, everybody. I'm very happy to be here and sharing. So I'm going to be speaking from the perspective of both an organization and as a person who's gone from farmer to distributor. And hip agriculture is pretty much that farm that Dexter described that moved from being sort of a sole, like small purchase distributor to the school system, then to creating a hui of farmers who are supplying to the school. And so we were part of the first pilot for farm to school in the state with the Kohala complex. And so that's 3 schools. It's an elementary, a high school, and a middle school. Our experience with farm to school even started before we were supplying produce, in that our organization was doing in-class workshops, farm field trips, supporting the development of the Garden to Cafeteria program and pilot, a high school farm mentorship, farm internship for high schoolers in the summer on our farm, and a year-long apprenticeship for post-secondary students. And that all culminated in us developing an aggregation site this past August to meet the needs of our local farmers for cold storage and actually allow us to be able to aggregate more produce for the cafeteria in order to kind of meet the demands that they had. So when Dexter talks about 100,000 lunch servings and 30,000 breakfast servings, that's obviously much smaller in our district, but still from the perspective of one single farm, that's kind of hard to meet when we know that they have a need for 400 pounds of citrus every week for as long as they can. It's a little bit untenable on any one of us. So I'm really behind and kind of banging the drum of food hubs. And so that's something I'm really grateful for, is that we have 3 food hubs here. I'm going to be talking about that experience from slightly different perspectives. And so our food hub was developed because we had access to the infrastructure of cold storage, a wash pack, and in the future, community support services like commercial kitchen, things that are going to allow growers to scale. What we've seen over the last year, just in comparing the spring semester of 2019 to the current semester, or this last semester in the fall, the aggregation center allowed us to increase the community's input into farm to school by leaps and bounds. So from Hip Ag being one producer who may be sourced from a couple different farms occasionally, we were able to increase the farmer participation to 15 other local farms. Most of those are from within 5 miles of the school itself, and then a couple in the Waimea area for select products. And so to to borrow a page from Dexter's book, because our farm was in a big transition this year, with leadership moving out and new farm directors moving in, we're not really sure at this point how much we've grown the pie, so to speak. What we do know is that we've just been able to aggregate more from other farms and kind of take the pressure off of our farm while still being the anchor of the farm to school supply. So all of a sudden, from one farm doing 90%, we've got now over half of the food going into the schools coming from other local producers, and resulting in a 90% increase in the revenue that's going to other farms. And one of the things there that I think is really wonderful is that being a small local food hub or a small group of farmers allows us to have a deeper connection between the farmer experience and the cafeteria needs. So on average, what I'm seeing is it allows us to use our own discernment as farmers to get a good price to the other local producers, and then kind of buffer between the needs of the school in terms of price point. So if the school cafeteria says that the lettuce is just a little too expensive and they want to buy local, but they're having a hard time with paying $6.50 a pound, and the producer really needs to get at least $5 a pound for this local aquaponic lettuce, then we're able to kind of shift in the middle and make sure that we can make our margin maybe a little bit smaller to meet the needs of both of those people. And that really kind of falls under the lens of our mission, which is primarily farm to school. And then the second part of our mission is farmer support services. So really, those are the two perspectives that I hold when we're making those decisions about this program, the Food Hub, which really we're building into being a critical piece of community infrastructure for years to come. And we've certainly had our challenges throughout this process over the last few years. I've got a couple anecdotes, just a second. One of the things that I wanted to mention is that the aggregation center itself has also allowed us to source more seasonal varieties of fruits and vegetables that our farm wasn't necessarily growing in big enough quantity to be able to move it into the school. For instance, dragon fruit and star fruit, we were able to bring in a lot, hold it in cold storage for a day or two, and then move it into the school and get that revenue really to local farms, but then also to diversify the crop offerings to the school itself. And that's a big part of sort of the challenge of working with this large institution, is that their menu seems pretty consistent throughout the year what they're looking for, and that really doesn't necessarily fall into the seasonality of what crops are available for us. For example, bananas are a lot slower in the winter here, so we don't have the supply, but they're booming in the summer when school's off. So finding those ways within our systems to be able to make that work and get some of those like seasonal crops in when we can is really just speaks to the connection with the cafeteria staff itself. That's really important, and having that direct local connection to be able to have conversations back and forth about, I have this farm and they have white pineapple right now, we got to get on it in order to get that in, or dragon fruit or star fruit. And so there's a bit of education on our side to the cafeteria managers to say, here's what's seasonal, here's how we can use it. And sometimes I think that's a little outside of the scope of what a small farm can do. And that is to say that I think that food hubs and small aggregators, especially the local aggregators, are really important in bridging that gap between the two, and really allows a lot more entry points for people who are starting up farming or have small to mid-scale farms to be able to move things in with some flexibility around their cropping schedule, around what's coming up when, and not to be quite as locked into, I have to have 60 pounds of bok choy every Tuesday to the school, etc. So my anecdote about the star fruit comes up next. So that's what I ordered from this farm, and the producer brought me in a laundry hamper 50 pounds of star fruit. And I didn't see it when it came in because we were prepping for this big event. And I just said, yeah, put it in the cooler. Thank you so much. I'll get back to you later. Please forgive me. And when I saw that it was just like crammed into a laundry basket, I was crushed. Really, because I have that perspective as a farmer that, like, I just want to take I want to buy everything from you. I want to be able to give you as much cash as I can at the moment and really support your operation and, like, provide this entry point into farm to school, which is so close to so many of our hearts. And then all of a sudden I slammed up against the wall of being a distributor and what that means, and having to do a lot of education with farmers and quality control. And so my sort of takeaway from that for farmers specifically is to have an awareness of your crop, appropriate harvesting, washing, and grading, and to really work with your distributor to know what quality needs they have to be able to meet that mark, because nobody wants to be turned away, you know. And in this example, you can see that of that 50 pounds, I was only able to salvage about 12 pounds of it, most of it underripe, not great condition. And that was kind of heartbreaking for me and for that person. And so as a distributor also, it's just like working with the cafeteria to know what quality do they need, what weight do they need, how many days is it going to sit, when are they going to use it, etc. And I guess the last anecdote that I'll share is kind of this moment that we've been in now, which really speaks to seasonality, in that we put out a call to the community asking for citrus so that we could meet this like 400 pounds of citrus a week mark. It was huge. And we started having it flood in, hundreds and hundreds of pounds from different people in the community who had a couple trees of oranges, some folks had some tangelos, etc. And what we failed to consider at the time was that school break was coming up for winter right as the season was booming. And so all of a sudden I had like 400 to 600 pounds of oranges and tangerines sitting in our chill, and the school couldn't use it because they were in the process of cleaning out their fridges for winter break. And so really the lesson there was, for me, that as a distributor, you really have to be working with the school on their schedule and planning. The other challenge that we work with right now is that our school gets Department of Defense money, and they have to kind of use that first, which means that I can aggregate citrus all day long while the season lasts, but if they have to use or lose that money, they're going to have to go to a larger distributor first. So that's sort of one of the things that we're bumping up against now, and really trying to work with the DOE to kind of figure out how we can do freezing or hold things longer or manage that surplus when we have it so that it can be used longer in the season. So I would say, to sum up, our experience has really been about doing our best to meet the DOE where they're at, working with Dexter to kind of understand, like, this is a big learning process for all of us along the way, but slowly but surely we're getting there.
Thank you so much, Sunshine. So our next presenter is Donna Shapiro. She's the general manager of Hawaii Ulu Co-op.
Aloha kako. I'm happy to share with you about our experience. Thank you so much for having us. So we were established just over 3 years ago with 9 farmers from all around Hawaii Island. And our mission was to revitalize ulu as a viable crop and dietary staple for Hawaii. And we always had a strong, I guess, value system around the youth because ulu is no longer a dietary staple, and most people in Hawaii no longer eat ulu on a regular basis. So we always sort of felt like starting with the youth, introducing them to ulu and educating the next generation was a really important part of our mission. As we started developing our co-op business model, we were very interested in selling to DOE, I think around when the Aina Pono program was still starting. And in the beginning, as you can see by this graph, we only brought in about 11,000 pounds in our first season. But we knew that our volumes were increasing rapidly just based on the number of trees that our members had planted. Less than a quarter of our members' trees are fruiting yet. So we will continue to see this exponential growth. So the potential alignment between a co-op of small farmers, growing rapidly, and a large institution like DOE seemed to have a lot of potential. And as you can see in this chart, over the last 3.5 years, our membership has grown rapidly, I think a lot faster than we thought. And our volumes have continued to grow as well. And because the growth has been so fast paced, finding high volume sales is really crucial just so that we're able to move these increasingly large volumes. And the other kind of core aspect of our business model, and I'm sorry, I'm not sure how to turn off the texting sound on my computer during the webinar, but so because ulu is very seasonal, and because our supply comes from many, many very small farmers, we, since the beginning, have sort of recognized the need for minimal processing. And in our case, our minimal processing involves cleaning, peeling, coring, cutting into fairly large pieces. We're not talking about dices, steaming and freezing. And this simply allows the fruit to have an extended shelf life really throughout the year. Now that it's in the freezer, it can be available year round. Seasonality is no longer a factor, and it makes it much easier to use and to prep. And so the combination of having larger volumes and having a minimally processed product that was easy to store and that we could develop institutional size volumes in, all ended up being really beneficial in working with DOE. So our first sale to DOE was in March of 2018. I believe that was basically the first full cycle that DOE did the Harvest of the Month program. And as Dex mentioned, ulu was first featured as in a wrap, but the order from DOE didn't come in advance. It was very last minute, and it was off season. And this was only really our second year in production. So we simply didn't have the volume that they needed. They were asking for 10,000 pounds. That was the volume they needed for one meal for the whole state. And the Harvest of the Month program, I believe, is a statewide program. So that was basically the goal. But we supplied them what we could, and I believe they were able to provide the product to the schools on Oahu and maybe a few on Maui. But now that we had sort of tried this at a small scale, we knew that there was good potential. And so they put their order in advance for the following school year, the last school year, and we were able to supply the full amount they asked for and more. Some of the cafeteria managers liked the product so much that they kept using it. So we ended up supplying about 15,000 pounds of ulu to them last school year. They changed the recipe. It was now an ulu beef stew, as Dex mentioned, and that was part of the learning process. Ulu did not work out so great in a wrap. It worked out much better in a stew as basically a one-to-one substitute for what would have been imported potatoes. And as we developed more of a real working relationship with DOE, we were able to identify several additional crops that they wanted to purchase in this minimally processed form. And so we started developing products specifically for them. And we did a frozen whole ripe papaya, Okinawan sweet potato chunks that were peeled and frozen, and both green and ripe papaya. And all of those products have actually been used now for the second year in a row. So, you know, this current school year is not yet over, but we, and the beef stew, I should say, was transitioned from only a monthly harvest item to a part of the regular menu rotation, which we've been just totally excited about, and our farmers are very excited about it. But I should add that there has been a lot of challenge around transitioning this local crop onto the regular menu. We're still trying to figure out why, but it's just not being purchased in the quantities that you would expect. So there seem to still be some communication issues around introducing new local crops that weren't on the menu before, and probably just more training and outreach and education that's needed to see it become truly successful. So we're committed to continue working with DOE to get ulu on the regular menu in a way that's really widely used and celebrated, as well as other local crops. So just a few final thoughts. There are many challenges to working with school purchasing. It's really not like any other customer. We've developed a bunch of educational resources, which you guys can check out on our website, eatbreadfruit.com/resources. There's fact sheets for all the crops that we have sold to the schools, as along with a home recipe of the same dish that they're serving in the school, in hopes that that will just increase receptivity. We've also worked to develop recipes with Kealakehe High School Culinary Arts program, where the students actually develop USDA compliant recipes with for the cafeteria, so at cafeteria scale, and they learn about math and business and cooking at the same time. The contracting requirement is pretty challenging, and we're very happy to work through a distributor so that we don't have the direct contract, but then there's other challenges with that, because now you have 3 parties involved. It's well worth it, but just be prepared that there are challenges. And another key point is just the importance of diversification. So DOE has become a really significant customer for us, and we are remaining cognizant of the fact that relying on any one customer or any one crop is risky. So we're still working, and we'll continue to, on just diversifying our customer base and our crop base, so we're not relying on any one thing. And the final point, to echo Sunshine, aligning institutional scale demand with Hawaii's supply and infrastructure is tricky, because 96% of Hawaii's farmers are small scale, and DOE's demand is large scale. And so food hubs and co-ops that can provide these mid-tier bridges between many small farmers and a few number of large customers is absolutely critical. I think there needs to be a lot more support for these food hub models, whatever their structure, nonprofit, for-profit, co-op. They have a big role to play if we are to increase our food security and increase the Aina Pono program. Thank you.
Our next presenter is Harmony Williams. She's the Executive Director of Sustainable Molokai.
Great, thank you so much, and aloha everyone. Basically, I wanted to just speak to our organization's role with being an FFVP vendor. So for those of you who aren't familiar, FFVP stands for the Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Program. So I included the USDA definition here, but really the highlights of it are that, one, it's provided to eligible elementary schools, which includes those that have 50% or more free and reduced meals. And that it's provided during the school day, separate from the National School Breakfast and Lunch Program. And really the goal of the program is to introduce our children to fresh fruits and vegetables, to different varieties, and just get them used to eating fresh produce instead of other kinds of snacks. And so of course, with our organization really focused on local food, we do the best we can to get as much local produce, through into the schools as well. Okay. So here I just provided this slide to kind of give an overview of our timeline with this program. So this will be our 6th year currently, our 6th school year. And it's really evolved over time, both in the application process, as well as just how we've interacted with the schools, as well as which schools have signed up. And so kind of that the first column, I guess almost, talks about the application process. When we started in 2014 and 15, you know, it was really just the easiest way for us to get local produce into the schools. Over the years, the application process has gotten a little tougher. And I will say that this year has been the toughest so far. And at this point, we still haven't been officially approved to, you know, to implement the program. But I know it seems really late, but most years we haven't started until January, so we're not that far off. And the process is always changing. So I know Dexter and DOE guys are working to improve it. So there's hope that it will get easier again. And then just over the years, the number of schools have changed, and how the food is processed, which I'll talk about a little more. Before we switch slides though, I just wanted to talk about that bottom gray box. It's just a quick snapshot of some of the documentation that was required this year. So without going through it all, if you just glance at it, you can see it's kind of a lot of paperwork. So, okay, go ahead. So the kind of the four main aspects that I wanted to touch on are getting the school to apply, applying to become a vendor, and then processing the fresh fruit and vegetables, as well as delivering them to the schools. Kind of the different aspects of FFVP, because if you just start talking, sometimes it gets confusing between the different aspects of it. So first thing you have to do is get the school to apply. There's a list that DOE provides at the beginning of each school year that shows which schools are eligible. And then it's really up to the principals to fill out the application and submit it. So of course the challenge with that is, you know, principals have a ton of things to deal with. So getting them to actually, you know, fill out that application, get it submitted. And the application does ask a little bit about, you know, how the cafeteria will be involved, how it will be delivered or distributed. And so it's not something the principal can really do in their office by themselves. They need to kind of talk with the rest of the school. So obviously my tips for that are to go, you know, ideally if you could just set up a meeting with the principal, the cafeteria manager, staff, and you know, as many teachers as you can get there. That's really the best way to have a chance for success, and have everybody working together to implement it. Okay, and then onto the vendor application. Dexter did a good job of covering a lot of what's required. And thank you for clarifying. I was going to say high E-Pro also. But so the high pro vendor registration process, yeah, we covered a lot of that earlier. So I'll just say that, you know, onto the challenges, it really has continued to change year to year. And there's just a lot of paperwork, especially if you don't have a certified kitchen, which we don't. So renting one means that you then have to get that paperwork from that kitchen manager. So moving on to the FFVP processing, basically step number one is to figure out if the school that you're working with, if the cafeteria wants to do the processing or not. You know, in an ideal scenario, the easiest scenario is if they say, just get us the produce and we'll process it, meaning, you know, wash it, chop it, put it in some kind of serving, you know, dish or container and getting it to the students. If not, then you have to figure out where you're going to process, how you're going to do it, and who is going to do it. For us, so the first year, our cafeteria manager did it all. And so it was really super easy. We got produce, we dropped it at the cafeteria, and we were pretty much POW. However, over the years, as things have changed, the cafeterias have said, sorry, we just can't really add it to our schedule. We don't have the labor power. So if you could figure it out, that'd be great. So we've been able to partner with our community health center to use their certified kitchen. But then you have to find people that'll go in and, you know, actually process the produce to get it ready for serving. So onto the tip side, you know, what we've done for that in the past is we've had either Food Corps or AmeriCorps members. Last year we had interns, and some years we've actually hired or contracted staff, you know, to actually have that be their responsibility to both process the produce and get it to the school and do the delivery. And so the last piece, the delivery, again, it really depends on the school staff and you know, you as the vendor, your capacity. So, you know, our ideal scenario is when you can actually go into the classrooms directly and provide that produce along with nutrition education. I mean, we go in and, you know, kind of cover like, hey kids, do you know what this is? And hold the whole produce in our hand, whether it's a whole kalo or a whole ulu or a whole papaya. And you'd be shocked how many kids haven't necessarily seen it all whole. So it's, you know, I think it's really important for them to see that and then talk about where it was grown. You know, on Molokai, we're lucky, you know, a lot of kids can say, oh, you know, we can say this was grown and what part of the island by what farmer. A lot of them can connect with that. And then talk about the nutritional value and how it affects their body. And then we really wrap up by saying, okay, guys, let's take a bite, which really ensures that they actually try it. Because if you don't do that, the produce doesn't always get into their mouths. So obviously the challenges with that are getting the teachers on board, because really you're asking to come in and disrupt their classroom. And so we have 2 schools that we've worked with the most over the past 5-6 years. One of them loves for us to come into the classrooms. They're like, it's a smaller school. They are like, you know, it's so great for the kids. They're really dedicated to farm to school. The other school, you know, the teachers are just like, sorry, this is really disrupting, you know, can we do it some other way? And so we basically do it at the beginning of recess. So obviously they don't get as much direct nutrition education with that. In summary, I think FFEP does have some hoops to jump through, but it's definitely worth it. I mean, I think this picture is a great, you know, example of the awesomeness of the program, the potential of the program, right? So the kids actually seeing the ulu, holding it, and then getting to try it. So that's it. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you to all of our presenters. We are going to have a quick Q&A. I did want to invite Leidy Bernal to kind of jump back in, representing Hawaii Pacific Health Institute and the State Farm to School Hui. Hi, Leidy.
Thank you. Hi, thanks, Joelle. Just wanted to briefly mention that at the Hawaii State Legislature this session, there are 2 bills to support food hubs with funding through Department of Agriculture, and those are House Bill 1892 and Senate Bill 2722. The Senate bill has a hearing scheduled next week, Wednesday, February 5th. So I encourage everyone to get involved and voice your support. Thank you.
Thank you. And we can go ahead and go to our Q&A. That would be Dexter and Leidy, correct?
Yep. This is Dex, and just going to chime in just to point out, Al from Hawaii Child Nutrition Programs is clarifying that for the fresh fruit and vegetable program eligibility, schools over 50% free and reduced are given priority, but schools below 50% can be included if there are funds available after the highest need schools are accommodated. So while preference is given to the schools with higher free and reduced, if there is a school that's 50% or below, they could apply, but it doesn't guarantee their participation. There's about 10 questions that are answered in the Q&A tab. So if you want to skim over those, feel free. There is one more that I am attempting to answer, and I keep typing and deleting my answers because I want to be a little non-committal on this. But the question is, seems like current DOE requirements do not always align with local seasonality of products. Is there a process tracking each desired product? So over time, each product can have a local solution developed and help farmers, producers develop products that can work, as Donna discussed. Yes and no. There really isn't a formal process, but as a product or a need arises. So actually, I've so far worked on both ends, that there was a solution before we even knew a need, and we worked it backwards, but also there's needs that we've stated to then work forward. But I think there is a gap here that would love someone else to have a solution and be able to implement it, is to be able, so for the Department of Education to state our needs, that we want local citrus in all our schools one day, and to have an entity that will build it for us to make it happen. I do know there are some farm to school and farm to state institution positions that are getting scattered in different areas across the state, which may fulfill that need in this soon. But it's also something that the private sector might be able to do. One example of almost a backward version is what the Ulu Co-op is doing. Yes, let's start there. The Ulu Co-op. We didn't know we wanted Ulu until they came around, and we're now at a place that realized incorporating native foods is an important pillar of what we do. So figuring out kalo, we have a kalo solicitation out now that's going to close very, very soon. That is one way that we're we're wanting to figure out how we can incorporate those kinds of things. But we throw these things out to the world, and hopefully somebody will build it for us. So there's no real process in both tracking nor developing the solutions for our needs. We would love somebody to do that. And one thing is because it is difficult for the Department of Ed to do both the marketing of the product in our school or developing the need, but also then fulfilling the supply. So it does get a little tricky because we're the one launching a solicitation. So if I'm helping to build a solution to that solicitation, it gets a little bit gray. James, I'll try and put that into words to also answer it, but kind of had to stumble over it verbally for everyone. Another question from Mr. or Miss Anonymous is what vegetables are in demand? Sadly, most kids don't really love vegetables, so that might be a hard question to answer in what is in demand, but really what we do serve a lot of is lettuce. We serve a lot of romaine green leaf lettuces, not necessarily microgreens. Currently, we do a lot of carrots and tomatoes. Cucumbers is another product that we do use a lot of, and broccoli. So those are probably the top items that we utilize. We currently do a shelled edamame that we include in some salads as well. And is there a way that current food hubs can see the prices offered per pound for different crops by DOE to compare with other customers? Yes, pricing is a public document and it can be requested. So if you'd like to see that, if you could email me, I will be able to send you the price list, as well as, we're a public institution. So those kinds of things are available.
All right. Well, thank you all. Mahalo to all of you. I just want to remind everybody that you can go to the ainapono.org website as well as farmtoschoolhui.org website. There's a resource section with Aina Pono tab. Please sign up for email updates. We have a list of the participants here. We're going to go ahead and push this webinar out in a recording and get that on. And I think all the local resources or the county resources will have that as well. So again, we really appreciate everybody joining us and have a great rest of your Thursday.